there. Welcome to today's lesson. It's good to have you back. I hope you've been enjoying our lessons and you've been learning. Today, we will be looking at reflexive pronouns as well as objective pronouns. In our previous lesson on pronouns, we talked about the personal pronouns, also known as the subject pronouns, as well as the possessive pronouns. But in today's lesson, we'll be looking at the reflexive pronouns and objective pronouns in Ibibio. But before we get started with the lesson, it is good to have a little recap, a brief recap of what we did in our previous lesson on pronoun, as it will also serve as a basis for today's lesson. So let's get started with the lesson. The subject pronouns occur in the subject area. That is, the personal pronouns occur in the subject area and is the subject of the sentence, subject of the verb. So let us look at what we did for the first person, me. That I, afo, for the singular, you. Then we look at enye for the third person singular. That is he or she or it. Then for the plural, we talked about nyan. Nyan. That is we. Ndufo. For the second person plural, ndufo, you. And the third person plural in the subject area, ommo. Ommo, that is there. In our previous lesson, we cited some examples on how you can apply these pronouns to make sentences in Ibibio language. Refer back to that lesson. Okay, to move forward, we look at the possessive pronouns. For the possessive pronouns, we had ake conjoined with ami. Ami. Although we noted some slight changes in some of the pronouns. So, for instance, in the first person singular, we had ake me. Ake me. That is mine. Mine. For the second person singular, we had ekemfo. Ekemfo. Yours. For the third person singular, in the possessive pronouns, we had ekomo. Ekeomo. That is or as or its. Its. Please take out the apostrophe s. Its. Then for the first person plural, we had ekenyan. Ekenyan. Ours. We had for the second person plural, eke ndufo. Eke ndufo. That is yours. Then for the third person plural in the possessive pronouns, we had eke ommo. Eke ommo. That is theirs. Check the description section for the link to this lesson. Now let's get started with today's lesson. Today's lesson is on reflexive pronouns and objective pronouns. So we say that reflexive pronouns are formed by conjoining the word idem, that is self, to the personal pronouns. So now let's get the persons. We have the first person, the second person, and the third person pronouns in place. All right. So for the reflexive, we have in the singular area and also in the plural area, we have the reflexive in the first person as idem me. Idem me. That is myself. Myself. For the second person singular, we have idem mfo. Idem mfo. yourself, yourself. All right. So for the third person singular, we have idem omo. Idem omo. That is himself or herself or itself. For the plural, in the first person plural, we have idemnyen. Idemnyen, that is ourselves. For the second person, we have idem dufo. Idem ndufo, that is yourselves. And for the third person plural, we have idem ommo. Idem ommo, that is themselves. Themselves. As you can see, the word idem is what really makes the pronoun a reflexive pronoun, which talk about self, idem. Now let's take a look at some of the examples of reflexive pronouns. Number one, we have ntang mbanga idem me. Ntang mbanga idem me. I'm referring to myself. 2. Tang banga idem fu. Tang banga idem fu. Talk about yourself. 3. Yak enye atang abanga idem omo. Yak enye atang abanga idem omo. Let him talk about himself. Itang ibanga idem nyen. Itang ibanga idem nyen. We are referring to ourselves. Etang ebanga idem ndufo. Etang ebanga idem ndufo. Talk about yourselves. Number 6. Etang ebanga idem ommo. Etang ebanga idem ommo. Remember in our previous lesson where I emphasized on either omitting the pronouns, the personal pronouns, without altering the meaning of the sentence. That is because of the concord markers that has been applied to these verbs. Now, don't forget that a concord marker is a subject-verb agreement. In Ibibio, we have those concord markers that stands for person. For instance, we have I on example number 4. I itang ibanga. Now, the I concord marker stands for the first person plural in the subject area. Itang ibanga idem nyan. That means we are referring to ourselves. The number one example, ntang and mbanga idem me. Now, and represents concord markers for the first person singular. In example number 5, we have a with a rest tone to indicate the second person plural. Etang ebanga idem ndufo. For the third person plural, example, etang ebanga idem ommo. A with a low tone. In our next lesson or subsequent lesson, we shall look at concord markers in Ibibio. Now, we shall briefly take a look at the objective pronouns. The objective pronouns. We have in the first person singular, mean or mien. Mean or mien, that means me. Now, mien is dialectical. Some dialect has mean while others have mien. And the second person singular, we have fin or fien. Fin or fien, that is you. Then in the third person singular, we have enye, that means him or a or it. In the first person plural, we have nyan, nyan. That means us. In the second person plural, we have ndufo, ndufo. That means you. And in the third person plural, we have ommo, ommo. That is them. Let's quickly take a look at some of the examples we have on the board for the objective pronouns. The first one is mbet mien. Mbet mien, waits for me. Second one is ubet fien. I'm waiting for you. Now, don't forget about what we talked on concord markers. As you can see, there is the application of concord markers on the examples. Number 3, ibet enye, ibet enye. We are waiting for him. Bet nyan, waits for us. Ibet ndufo, ibet ndufo. We are waiting for you. Ebet ommo, ebet ommo. They are waiting for them. We have come to the end of today's lesson. I hope you've learned something. If you've learned something from this lesson, do well to drop a comment on the comment section. And if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, click the subscribe button. See you in our next lesson.